for me personally, it's being very, very selfish with my time.
Mm.
So I have a process every single day where my first 30 minutes is devoted to planning my day.
Okay.
And the first thing that I always do is I go through my email, and they always say to not do this, but I do it in such a way where I'm not actually answering my email. I
Mm.
use a program called Sorted, and it basically turns your Gmail box into a Kanban board.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yes.
The pursuit of excellence is something we're all striving towards.
I want you to focus on what you do best.
You need to have an approval. How many approvals? What are the steps?
It's really about listening.
If it's not documented, it's not done.
Thanks for tuning into In Systems We Trust, the show where we dive into all things systems and processes and hear from the professionals that are using them to change the landscape of their organizations every day. Today I'm talking with Stacy L. Carlson. Stacy believes that when you bring systems and processes into your workflow, you bring calm to the chaos. In 2005, Stacy launched an e-commerce company focused on digital scrapbooking. Over the next 12 years, her extensive library of processes allowed her to explore other ventures where she continued to focus on bringing calm to the chaos. Stacy is now the partner manager at Smile, where she is using her love for systems and processes to build a scalable partner program that can grow as the program grows. And welcome to the show, Stacy.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. Yeah, you're in the right spot. Definitely. We're talking about systems and processes today. I love it and looking forward to diving in. And before we do, I just want you to expand upon that bio a little bit. I know that there's always stuff kind of in the in-between that you leave out on that. So I want you to just kind of talk about more on your role at Smile, the companies that are under Smile, and what you do there.
Yeah, so Smile creates two productivity softwares. The first one is PDF Pen, which is a Mac compatible product. And then the second one is TextExpander, which is their SaaS base, and it's compatible across both Mac, Windows, and Chromebooks. So we have a Chrome extension. We also have it on iOS. My main focus is usually TextExpander, just mainly because that's the one that covers more people. And a little bit about TextExpander is that we're not necessarily industry agnostic. And what I mean by that is that there's not just one industry that uses us. Anybody who types kind of uses us. But as a company, we can't focus on everybody. So the main companies that use us is customer support, recruitment, and sales. Those are the main ones.
And so 2005, how do you go from, running an e-commerce store and digital scrapbooking to making this transition into the world of optimization and productivity and, systems and processes? Can you talk about that transition for a bit? Because it's a very, big difference in where you came from. And I'd love to know this extensive library that you put together, how you started developing that and what, problem that was solving for you.
Yeah, so in 2005, I was a mom to one child, and it was important for me to be able to do a job at home. And I've always been in the tech industry. So I happen to have a background in graphics. I used to work at a company called Micrographics under their software program, Micrographics Picture Publisher, which is graphics. And one of my hobbies was digital scrapbooking. And I thought, hey, why don't we start a community? Other people are doing it. I could do this. And in a night with $300 pulled out of my bank account, we launched this e-commerce website. And it was a huge community. Over the 12 years, we ended up with roughly 75,000 users who logged in on a regular basis. We had over 3 million photos that were uploaded to our gallery. But during that, because I am such a process-driven person, I started creating processes on how to do everything, from payment from our designers to commenting in the gallery, even how to ban somebody in our software. And it was 2014. I was now the mom to 2 kids. The second one had started kindergarten, and I realized my industry was dying because of digital scrapbooking. Everybody used Photoshop on a desktop. So I knew that I needed to expand to mobile. So I applied to a business accelerator for a mobile app idea. And that's where my life kind of changed because I had all these systems and processes created. I could immerse myself into that accelerator, which was a 90-day program. And I handed my company over to my entire team. And I said,
Awesome.
run it, because I needed to focus on this other aspect. And when I came out the other end, my company was still going. It was going better than it was before. And I realized, wait a minute, they don't actually need me at this point. They need me to, make the big decisions, but they don't need me for the day-to-day. And that's kind of where my career kind of diverted to consulting with other people in regards to processes. Just mainly because I saw how liberating it was to hand something over to somebody else and be confident that they could do it as well as I did, if not better.
Good for you. Yeah, I'd love to know where that love and drive for processes goes, because, at Ditto, when we meet with a potential customer, right, we're coming in and they understand process. They know that there is a need for process in the business, but they have neglected, taking the time to document so that they can do what you did, hand it off to someone else and say, you run it. So where did that understanding and, drive or like need for that process in your business come from?
Yeah, I think I was born with it. You know how some people are born entrepreneurs. I was not born an entrepreneur. I was born a process person.
Got it.
But no, I mean, there's fine tuning too. Learning better processes in regards to how to build a process has always been a big part of it too. And for me, creating a process is just second nature. I tell people that if I had an instruction manual, it would actually say everything I do is a process. From the time I wake up in the morning, I have a process on how I'm going to drive to work for the day based off of what roads were closed yesterday. So my entire life is built that way. It's just the way my brain works. But I've also seen that if it's a teachable thing, it's not something that, if you're not born with it, you can't do it. So, yeah.
Okay. No, I love that. Everything, has a process. I totally agree. In one of our earlier episodes, I think it was episode 2, Keith Gillette was on and, kind of said, if it's not documented, it's not done. Mm-hmm. And I think that can apply in so many areas for both life and business. I'm curious though, you said something that I haven't heard before. We understand that there's a process for something like driving to work. Have you actually documented that? Like you have different routes? What does that look like?
It's all in my head. It's
Okay.
It's so ludicrous. My husband laughs at me. In the shower, I'm thinking about, okay, yesterday, 56th Street, the right-hand lane was closed. I need to make sure I get over to the left-hand lane before I get to like Pine Lake. And this is the way that I, when I get into my car, I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
And it's, I tell people it's kind of like a computer. Your computer has a process that it runs through. And when something odd happens, you recalculate. And that's what I do is, if, okay, now the left lane's closed instead of the right, recalculate and readjust and keep moving forward.
Love the approach. Yeah. Some takeaways there for sure. I'd love to dive in and talk a bit more about the platforms and the programs that Smile offers, more specifically TextExpander. So Can you tell us more about what TextExpander is? What does it do? How does it work? Give us the rundown on all of that.
So TextExpander. So everybody has canned responses. Everybody has things that they're typing over on a daily basis. Typically, we store those in a specific software. So a good example is Gmail has canned responses that only work in Gmail. Zendesk has canned responses that only work in Zendesk. What we do is take all those canned responses, that content, and we give you a knowledge base to house it that then works in any text field. So a good example is you have a customer support person who's answering tickets on social media, but also in your help desk software. All they have to do, the information's put into TextExpander, and then we give you an abbreviation. So let's say somebody asks, how do you download your software? We have a canned response. And the abbreviation could be \download. So they just have to type in \download. It expands the canned response, the content. And now they have the same answer no matter where they're answering that question at. And we now live in a world where we're not in one place. With social media, you could be answering questions on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. And So having a uniform knowledge base and a uniform hub for all of your knowledge to be put into is hugely beneficial, especially when you're trying to scale. You know, the problem with not creating processes is that we retain knowledge. We become hoarders of knowledge. We keep it in our heads. We don't want to share it. And one of the ways to start building those processes is start putting those canned responses someplace for your entire team to access. You want to go on a vacation someday, so somebody has to take over your job. And if your job is customer support, how are they going to do it in a way that still maintains your brand and the way that you say things?
Yeah, so it's keeping everyone aligned. And so like with the software, because I think that's solving a huge problem. You hit it right on the head, right? Like every piece of platform or every piece of software, has their own canned responses, has their own snippets. Like we use Superhuman for email. There's snippets there. HubSpot has its own onboard snippets as well. But this is like breaking down those silos. And so what you just said there, like, are you enabling then teams to have a shared like library or resource when it comes to these snippets? Okay.
Yeah, so on our team account, you can actually create individual teams. So let's say you have, a good example is for us, we have sales, we have customer support. Customer support shared out to everybody in the company because that's something that common questions. However, you could go ahead and silo your sales snippets just to your sales team, or you can turn them on for the entire company. But yes, it's shared throughout your entire company. It's nice too if you're working with a lot of contractors and you want them to use specific wording, you give them an access to it as well, to a certain group area. And then they can also, we have inline search. And this is, in fact, my son was watching, he saw all my snippets. He's like, how do you remember all of those? Because our company has thousands of them. And I said, well, you don't. You search for them. But you search by keyword. So if I search, download, the word download, it's going to bring up every snippet that has the word download. And if you hover on it, it shows you exactly what it says, the snippet says. And so that's how you can quickly move through your knowledge base and find exactly the canned response that you want for whatever you're working on.
That was going to be my next question, but like to kind of think off of that, I mean, at one point you must get to a place as a company where there are just so many snippets you've created. I want to talk more about process and what your process looks like for your team and managing all of that. But what are some best practices then for how to manage the database, how to know like what's active? Are there analytics on how many times snippets are being used? How are you managing it, making sure everything is staying up to date and you're not forgetting things or, having outdated snippets or duplicate snippets? Because we talk a lot about that as well, right? Duplicating work. So what does the process look like for managing all of that behind the scenes?
Yeah, so the admin side of it, you can actually see stats. So you can input, I type 90 words per minute, but the majority of people are around 40 to 50. So you can put in 50, and then you can see. You're
just a little bit above average then.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little.
Putting us all to shame.
High achiever, what can I say?
Sure.
So you input what your words per minute is, and it'll actually tell you how much time you save. Like my hours right now for the last 30 days is right at 9.5 hours. So that means that all the canned responses, we figure out that the algorithm, and it's equals to 9 hours. And I always look at this in regards to how much is my time worth. And time is such a hard thing to quantify because, if I'm using a snippet where I just type in .s for my name instead of Stacy L. Carlson, that's only a few seconds. But how many times in a day do I type my name? How many times in a year? And then again, how much is my time worth? So it's those incremental times that keep adding up that once you start adding it together, it equals to big numbers. And then also in our app, we'll tell you that if you've duplicated a snippet, you'll also know if you've duplicated the snippet name, so there's a conflict. So like, if you do one .sig and you do a different one, name it, give it the same abbreviation, we'll let you know that as well.
Okay, that's incredible. Yeah, like there's so much wasted time. I mean, like we have a page from our kind of sales deck that we will walk our prospects through, but it talks about the amount of hours that are just wasted every single year in things like meetings and, talking about work projects, not actually doing the work, right? Like talking about the work projects, having time wasted in duplicating work because there isn't that visibility, right? And then, time in unnecessary meetings. And one thing that we haven't documented or don't fully understand yet is how much time are we spending typing out emails, just as one example, that we type all of the time, lines, greetings, openers, all the time, right? And so with those stats, like how are you breaking it down to businesses to like show them how it can benefit them? I mean, the stats you're going to show are obviously averages, but do you have numbers, and can you talk to, what it looks like for people in different industries as well? And are there use cases around that? I'd love to just know a little bit more about the data there.
Yeah, so because we have a 30-day trial, they can actually get in there and start using it. And that's it. The second they start using it, they start building their stats as well. So using the product actually ends up providing them with the numbers that they need to sell, the return on investment aspect. If they see that their customer support team now just saved, I think our team is, our main customer support is like 40 hours in the last 30 days. So if that means he's saving 40 hours using snippets, that's 40 hours that he now gets to spend answering different questions or spending more time on the more complicated questions instead of feeling like he has to rush through it. So that's a big aspect of use the product, really, get your customer support team, get your sales team, and then sit down and figure out, okay, this says that I saved 3 hours this month. What could I do with 3 hours? That's 18 more phone calls I could have made, or 15 more emails that I could have sent out. So again, it goes all looking at those stats, really understanding, what could you have done with that time, or what did you do with that time? In most cases, you're not going to know what you did, but quantifying it and understanding that, it means that I get to, cold call 16 more people or send out 14 more messages on LinkedIn. It's putting it into that context so that they understand, especially with customer support. You save time, it means that you get to use that time somewhere else.
Yeah, I love the link to productivity there, and you kind of flipping the script on how you can take the time that is saved from using a tool like this to apply in other areas. I mean, anyone who has like an Apple product will see, the reports of screen time coming up, and I don't want to see that. That's not helpful, right? Like that time is gone. I need it, I think, but you don't want to see those things. So I do like the link to productivity and how we can flip the script there. So when it comes to your team, you're managing, you are the partner manager with Smile. And so what does it look like when you are documenting your own processes? There are new things that are rolled out. Is it a collective? Are you bringing your team together? You as the partner manager, are they coming from you and then you're passing it down? Walk us through that process a little bit.
Yeah, so a good example would be, I wear a lot of different hats. Not only am I working with our solution partners, but I also work with other companies to do co-marketing. And one of the things that we do is co-webinars. So this job was handed to me from somebody else who primarily did everything. I mean, marketing, creating the page, they did everything. So there was a process created, but there was a lot of empty spaces. So handed over to me. So that was put into ASANA, which is what our team uses. And then we initiated a kickoff meeting. Our first kickoff meeting was, I believe it was an hour and a half to go through this process. But we went through the process. We realized these are the things that they needed to know before we even started that meeting. So from there, I took that feedback and created a pre-kickoff meeting. So that's all the stuff that I get from the person that I'm co-hosting with. So I can put together a brief. So we just had another meeting for the kickoff. And again, it started out at an hour and a half. We're now down to 20 minutes. Because we also have a retrospective after every co-webinar of what worked, what didn't work. And these are so important because I get to take that feedback, go back to the original process, tweak it. So it will always be, a tweaking process. But I figure one more month, we're going to have a process that I can hand off to anybody. They're not going to have, my big goal for processes is always, can I hand this off to somebody and they have 0 questions? Can they follow it from point 1 to point Z, without any questions? And if I can get to that point, then I've succeeded. And because things change, software changes, that's when you always have to go back and reevaluate. The second somebody has a question, it means that something has changed in the process and you need to evaluate it.
Right. How often are you doing that? Going back and evaluating and looking at your processes?
Every single time we have a co-webinar, or every
Amazing.
single time we do a campaign. Honestly, every single time I do one, because having the retrospective at the end of what worked and what didn't work, it's going to give you big red flags of what needs to be tweaked, what
Right.
needs to be done so that this never happens again.
Right.
That's my goal, is to get to a point where, our retrospective takes 5 minutes because nobody can come up with what didn't go well.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's the goal, yeah. And
Yeah.
the fact that you were able to take, an hour and a half, meeting and reduce the time to 20 minutes, yeah, that shows that it's working. You're putting your time saving to really good use. Got a question for you. I mean, we have one of our developers on our team. She in one of our kickoff calls, several months ago now, we're talking about documenting processes and getting the team involved in that. It's not just one person, right? It's all of our responsibility and what that looks like. And she said two things. I'm gonna have to look at my whiteboard a minute, but it says, am I the only person who knows this thing? And then would others benefit? Sorry, am I the only person that knows this information? And would others benefit from knowing this information as well? And so I constantly encourage, my team to be thinking about that. Am I the only person that knows this? Would this help someone else? If you answered yes to any of the above questions, you document it.
Yep.
And we look at that. So are you encouraging your team to do the same thing kind of like on a day to day? What should that look like in their regular day? Or is it specifically after those retro meetings?
No. So I'm a huge proponent to that. We are not the only ones who store knowledge.
Yeah.
I think I told you about this originally. There's a TED Talk by Tom Wujek. It's called How to Make Toast. And he talks about how he brings everybody into a room and gives them Postit Notes and tells them to create the process. And I didn't understand how important this was. I was consulting with a university and their team, and they had this event. It was a huge event that actually had 3 mini events in it, and they had never sat down and set a process. So I brought everybody into the room after I taught them how to do the Postit Notes. And one of the things that he suggests is to actually create this process in silence. So no talking. You just write down the step on a Postit Note. You put it up on the wall. If you see one that's in the wrong place, you move it. And I sat there and watched this team take this giant project. I mean, it was huge. And they created an entire process for it, and not once did anybody speak. And it was like one of those, where you're just so overcome with amazement that this just happened. But it was, you can't create a process by yourself because you're not the only one in there. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs fall down, because they think they're the only ones who can create that process. But the problem is that, HR is going to have a step, in that process, or, engineering is going to have a step, and you don't know how they do it. And if you're trying to guess what they're doing, it's going to fail. So get everybody in a room and start putting Postit Notes up on that wall. I mean, you could do this again for everything in your job, as well as what way are you going to drive in the morning? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And like, I love that example of just like taking a team, get some Postit Notes, go off and do it on your own. Because I think in that specific exercise, I mean, we are talking about, creating toast, but it could apply to anything, right? You really get an understanding of where everyone's at. You say, okay, does my team understand the process? If I wasn't here, if I was on vacation or was unavailable or whatever it may be, or, we talk about growth, right? Like, we don't want to be doing this role that we're in forever, right? Do the people that are underneath me, my successors, subordinates, do they understand the process? Are they bought in? And most importantly, what I found out is that there are so many new and fresh ideas and ways of doing things that come from including your team in that process as well. And it's not until you give them the autonomy to go off and do that and explore that you really start to uncover those things. So
Yeah, and it also putting those together. So like whenever I have to bring my web designer in, I can't estimate time for him. He has to
Right.
tell me how long it takes. And I think that's again where people kind of where it falls through is that they'll estimate, well, this should only take you 2 hours, but realistically it's taking 20 hours. But then in the same respect, if you create a process and you're looking at it and you're like, okay, so there's a huge bottleneck here. Why is there this bottleneck?
Yeah.
And you realize that there's a step that actually could be excluded or made more efficient. You can't tell that until you figure out where in that process that bottleneck, and to understand why that bottleneck is even there in the first place.
No, exactly. Yeah. And I think as owners or as entrepreneurs, we get these blinders on, right? Where the knowledge starts with us, and at some point you have to give up control. But we see the process, and this is how it always is. But the more that you remove yourself from that day to day, the less you find that you are understanding about the new processes and the evolution of those things. And so it's almost like you have to just give up that control.
Yeah.
Right. Because, and I was talking to a team member today, and I kind of said, I can't remember the context now, but this is not mine. This does not belong to me. Right. This is a collective, and we're all at it together. So I love the approach and how you're managing your team. I want to get back to something that we started talking a little bit about, but it's this thought around like work about work, right? And it's a term. Love to hear that you guys are using ASANA. The term actually comes from ASANA,
Yep.
right? They've done studies on this work about work, and so there are numbers and surveys and white papers on this, but it's all that in between work, all the trying to find where something is, or typing out an email a million times that you don't have to. Yep. Talking about where that file is, what the due date is for this, and that general confusion that just happens on teams. It's inevitable, right? Unless you have the proper systems.
Yeah.
And so, what does that translate to in your business or in your company? And what are you doing with your team to eliminate this work about work?
Yeah. So, TextExpander number one. That's where our knowledge is. That's the first place we look. If we have a question, it's most likely already been answered by our customer support team, and the answer is in there. So that's the first place. So we are a fully remote team, and we've always been a fully remote team. So the pandemic didn't change anything in regards to that. And we use Slack heavily. That's how we communicate. So one thing that a lot of us have incorporated is if it's a question that doesn't need an immediate answer, we save it for a one-on-one, or we save it for our marketing meeting or our sales meeting, mainly because that decreases the amount of time that you're interrupting somebody else and being very respectful to their time, because we're a small company and we have a lot of things and everybody's wearing many hats.
Yeah.
And then heavily relying on Asana. I mean, that's the big one. And for me personally, I like to surround myself with my why. So you can only see behind me in my office, but in front of me I have giant Postit Notes, and each one of them has my rock, my key goal for the year. But it also has our core values for our company, because they're very important to us. And so every morning when I come in, I look at one of my Postit Notes that says, it's over here, what will I do today to bring a new partner on and activate them? And that's how I really focus on making sure that my day has something in there that's answering that question, and my day has something that's answering the other rocks that I need to get done. You can't get away, especially for me, because I'm creating a program. There's a lot of research and documentation. But my goal is to get to a point, in the next 2-3 months where everything is documented, so that I can focus on core, just doing versus the foundational aspect.
I love that. Just made me think about like your goals. You're seeing those things every single day. It's right in front of you, right? To try and tie it back to process. What does it look like for you to not only set goals for yourself, right? You have, the one on your board talking about onboarding and, securing a partner, right? What does that look like in systems like Asana, for example? How are you tracking that? How are you keeping yourself accountable? And then how are you including the team in that as well? Because we're all moving in the same direction, different areas of focus. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we've set up goals within Asana. So everybody, and then we have a marketing meeting every Tuesday, and we go over those. We're also doing OKRs, so we know what our OKRs are. We know that what we're contributing to those, and so that's our main focus. For me personally, it's being very, very selfish with my time. So I have a process every single day where my first 30 minutes is devoted to planning my day. And the first thing that I always do is I go through my email, and they always say to not do this, but I do it in such a way where I'm not actually answering my email. I use a program called Sorted, and it basically turns your Gmail box into a Kanban board. So, yes.
Interesting.
So what I do every morning is I go through all my emails, and I basically stick them in buckets. But doing this allows me to understand if there's an email that needs to be replied today that's going to take a large portion of my time, I can go ahead and block that time on my calendar. So that gives me an idea. So I don't answer any emails. First step is just put it into buckets. The second step is to actually block time on my calendar. And I do this again because I'm very selfish about my time. I need to have a blueprint, a process for me to walk through every single day to know what my next step is, since I wear lots of different hats. So I go through my calendar and I block off time for recruitment and for account management, but then I also block time off for those big emails. And then I make sure to schedule a lunch. Otherwise that doesn't happen. But by the end of the time that I've got that all blocked out, my entire calendar for the day is blocked, and I know what I'm doing. So again, it's a process even on my calendar. Like step 1, I'm going to do recruitment. Step 2, we're going to answer this email. I buffer in time for like those emergencies that come up, because those always happen. But for me, it's been a way to structure my life to make sure that I'm staying on my goals. Otherwise, I'm a learner by nature, so then I rabbit holes.
Yeah, of
so
course.
So that's my main focus, is to give myself a blueprint every single day of what I'm going to do.
That is key. I love that approach, and that you have that discipline to do that every single day. The name of the software was Sorted?
Yeah, it's SORTD, and it's just a Chrome extension.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to check it out.
Saved my life.
Thank you for that. Yeah, because I think again, I switched from Gmail to Superhuman for my personal email, and though it speeds up the workflow quite a bit with keyboard shortcuts, I haven't figured out a way to yet set priorities, right? And so I'm looking at the little badge for how many emails are in the inbox that I need to respond to, and it's just I don't even want to look at it. So just as we're kind of coming to a close here, I'm curious, we've talked about so much, and you've already said that you are industry agnostic when it comes to who can use TextExpander, but what is something that you think that when you either talk to partners or customers that are evaluating TextExpander, what is one thing that you come up against frequently that you think that they're missing or they're not understanding about process? Is there anything that you would want to say to those people?
Yeah. So every part of my process, I'll give you an example. So my recruitment process is mapped out. I know what emails I'm going to send, and because of my job, I can't just stick a person in a sequence. Each one involves an individual email that goes out. So my process has a corresponding snippet that's in TextExpander. So my first step is send out par.co, and then do follow-up CO. So this is part of my workflow. And the reason why I've done this is that in a year, we might not be on the CRM that we have now, which means at some point I'm going to have to move all of my sequences out of that CRM into something else. And this is for everything. You don't know what software you're going to be in a year or two. And if you can store that knowledge base in one key place and then filter it out from there, it's so important, because at some point you're going to be wasting tons of time trying to pull it out. And I'm always a very strategic thinker of the worst case scenario. What happens if our CRM goes out of business and gives no notice? You don't know these things. So what can I do to make sure that I'm covered as much as possible? But this also feeds into when I delegate this process to somebody else, they don't have to learn the software to do it. They just have to know where to find it in TextExpander. So that's the key part, is that, everybody's like, well, Zendesk has canned responses. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
HubSpot has canned responses. Absolutely. Are you going to be there in 1, 2, 3 years from now?
Right.
And how much time is it going to take you to pull everything out of there and put it into something else?
Yeah, that's great. And you probably said this earlier, but I'm thinking like of the flexibility between all the platforms, like the real, I think thing that for us, pushed us over the edge was like, we have to do this, is like, you can use it on mobile as well, right?
Yep.
And
Yes.
so I think, when it comes to storing that knowledge, having a repository where all of that lives, and again, it is accessible by your entire team.
Yes.
I think, there's definitely something there to be said. Last question here. I always love to know, we've already talked about a few of them, but you talked about Sorted, Asana, Slack, TextExpander, obviously. What else is in your tech stack that you resort to on a daily, weekly, monthly to keep you organized and on track?
My number one is Airtable.
Okay.
I'm in love with Airtable. And in fact, our entire partner program portal is built off of Airtable and another program called Stacker, which makes Airtable pretty, so it turns it into a web page. Because I've learned that not everybody can read Airtable; it becomes a little overwhelming.
Sure.
So Airtable, we use Slack a lot, and then we use Close for our CRM. So those
awesome.
are our big ones.
Okay, incredible. Well, like you said earlier, your time is very precious and you want to protect it. So I want to thank you for taking the time to be on this show today. Is there anything you wanted to say before we sign off? I'd love if you can just drop where people can connect with you.
Yeah.
Where are you spending your time online? If you wouldn't mind just giving us that information.
Yeah, so anybody can reach me at Stacy, S-T-A-C-Y, at smilesoftware.com. I'm also on LinkedIn under Stacy L. Carlson.
Perfect.
So, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. This was a really great conversation. I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much, and we'll chat with you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
If you like what you heard today, please like, subscribe, and follow on your preferred channel. If you know of a friend or colleague that would benefit from hearing this conversation, please share it with them so that we can reach more listeners just like you. As always, all the links from today's talk will be in the show notes. And remember, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. We'll see you next time.